Revolutionary greetings, comrades. We posted a video on the Shona language being taught as a subject in South Africa, a specific South African school. But what we are now seeing in some social media platforms, on the comments on the video that were recorded, one comes to a conclusion that indeed Zimbabwe is a divided nation. It needs a leadership, a political leadership that is able to unite the nation across ethnic lines. If you read clearly the comments, you will realize that quite a number of Zimbabweans who are not of Shona origin are opposed to the teaching of Shona language in some South African schools. And this goes deep back to 1980 when ZANU-PF failed to build a united Zimbabwe, an inclusive nation where everyone feels part of Zimbabwe. This speaks to the national question in Zimbabwe. We've been discussing the national question guided by Stalin when he was discussing the national question. And Comrade Stalin says the national question is in two components: the question of belonging and the class question when discussing the national question. So it is clear from the comments that are coming out that the question of belonging is unresolved in Zimbabwe because there are some who feel the dominance of Shona speaking supported by the government of Zimbabwe, to an extent that those minorities who feel dominated by the Shona speaking as a result of government policy are opposed because they view, are opposed to the teaching of Shona language in South Africa because they see that as an extension of the Shona dominance within the SADC region. And this is a result of a government that has failed to build an inclusive nation, because a responsible government will make it compulsory for citizens in Zimbabwe to study the two major African languages in Zimbabwe, isiNdebele and the Shona. Government will deploy public servants in Matebele land. When they are in Matebele land, be it as the traffic corps or teachers or health workers, when you speak to them in isiNdebele, they will say Andizo. And this angers a lot of people. But when you are of minority group and you do not speak the Shona language, you are not considered Zimbabwean enough. This cannot be blamed on the mass of the people. It's a government that has failed in its responsibility in building an inclusive nation, to an extent that Zimbabweans get divided on the teaching of Shona language in a foreign country like South Africa, where you will expect that it will be South Africans that will be dominating in the discussion on whether Shona language should be taught as a language in South Africa. It is actually Zimbabweans themselves. That's a failure by the government of Zimbabwe to build an inclusive nation. So Zimbabwe needs a leadership that clearly understands these divisions. So it is not a leadership that is only about removing ZANU-PF from power. Because removing ZANU-PF from power, replacing ZANU-PF with another political party or another government that also in its agenda is not attempting or does not understand on how to resolve the question of belonging. In other words, a government that will not understand how to make every Zimbabwean feel as a true citizen of Zimbabwe, not a second-class citizen. So the first step to build an inclusive society is that isiNdebele must be taught across the country. Shona must be taught across the country. Yes, I know there are other languages, Kalanga, Tonga, Sotho, Xhosa, as provided for in our constitution. But you'll know that over the years, or since independence up to about 2013, Zimbabwean constitution only recognized the 3 major languages as official languages: English, Shona or Chishona, and isiNdebele. The Venda people in Bedbridge, the Kalanga people in Bulilima, the Tonga people in Binga were taught in isiNdebele, which the 2013 constitution has to ratify, that every language, indigenous language, must be recognized and elevated into an official language. But you have 2 major languages, isiNdebele and the Shona. And this is where government has failed to build an inclusive nation. So a government that is to build an inclusive nation must first and foremost address the question of ethnicity. And we've argued in this platform that ethnicity is caused by us, the political leadership. We use the question of ethnicity when in our own political parties we say this person cannot lead because he's of this particular ethnic group, where it is now acceptable that a party that is led by a Ndebele person is said to be regional. A party led by a Shona person is said to be national. And when a political party or a political movement is established, the first thing is that the leader must be of Shona origin, deputized by a person of Ndebele origin. The Zimbabwe Communist Party rejects this because the Zimbabwe Communist Party sees the crisis in Zimbabwe as that of a class question, to say who owns the decisive means of production. Secondly, that we are all Zimbabweans. We all belong to Zimbabwe. And we say, as the Zimbabwe Communist Party, there is no Shona, there is no Ndebele, there is no Tonga, even though we recognize the languages. But what we have is the working class and the peasant who are victims of what today we call the looting class, which in its very nature is black. You might want to refer it as the black elite that continues to plunder our resources. And therefore, the Zimbabwe Communist Party then calls for the unit of the working class and the peasantry in dismantling the looting class, and they place the entire economy of Zimbabwe in the hands of the majority, and the majority being the working class and the peasantry. Therefore, a leader that gets elected to be president of Zimbabwe must be a leader who clearly understands the class question. A leader should not be elected on the basis of where they were born or on the basis of their origins, but they must be elected on the basis of their commitment to the class struggle. That's what the Zimbabwe Communist Party stands for. So it's clear that as we go to 44th year of our independence on the 18th of April, ZANU-PF has failed to build an inclusive nation. the opposition, the main opposition, has also failed to build an inclusive opposition where every person feels part of this opposition, part of belonging to a nation called Zimbabwe. So, as I started by saying that we discuss the teaching of Shona in South Africa, but what comes to the fore are clear ethnic divisions in Zimbabwe. And the Zimbabwe Communist Party, it is the only party in Zimbabwe that understands these divisions, and that these divisions are caused by the black elites, both in the ruling party and the opposition, for the purposes of them becoming leaders. Because you look into the opposition or the ruling party, the first qualification for one to lead is that you must be of Shona of origin. It doesn't matter whether you have capacity, you are clear to articulate issues. No, first you must be of Shona origin. And the Zimbabwe Communist Party rejects this. That one must be elected on the basis of being committed to the class struggle in Zimbabwe. We must complete the liberation of Zimbabwe. And a part of completing the liberation of Zimbabwe is to defeat the ethnic question. I should not be viewed as a Ndebele. I should be viewed as a Zimbabwean and as a leader who wants to contribute to the rebuilding of the Zimbabwean economy. Please write your comments in this section, like this video, subscribe to this YouTube channel. If you are on TikTok, please do follow us. Otherwise, Amandla Comrades.